Hey guys, tonight is really a night. The kind of night where the air feels a little heavier. The stars seem just a shade closer than usual, and the silence outside your window almost hums with expectation. You know that silence, the kind that makes you pause, tilt your head and wonder if the universe is holding its breath. Somewhere above, maybe beyond the velvet dark, something flickers. It isn't a plane. It isn't a shooting star. It's more like a ripple, the kind you see when you drop a stone into still water. Except this ripple spreads across the sky. I bet you won't survive more than 1 minute without your heart jumping just a little at that thought, the idea that tonight might be one of those nights when Earth gets a surprise visitor. If this story brings you peace, please like and subscribe to our channel. Settle down, listen carefully, and together, let's enjoy this tender tale that will help you drift off into the most delightful, restful sleep. Before we go further, let me invite you to loosen your thoughts. Share them with yourself. What are you feeling right now? Maybe you're tired. Maybe a little restless. Maybe your worries are buzzing louder than you'd like. Let them float up and out like leaves on a slow river, carried gently away. As you lie there, let your mind grow soft and open, ready to wander through this gentle story until sleep finds you. The shimmer in the sky lingers. At first, the people of the small town of Maple Hollow think it's a weather balloon, or maybe the aurora borealis reaching unusually far south. The local weather forecaster, who once mistakenly predicted snow in July, earning himself the nickname Snow July Sam, insists it's just an atmospheric trick. Still, even Sam finds himself stepping out onto his porch, hands shoved into his robe pockets, staring upward longer than he'd like to admit. The flicker doesn't behave like lightning, nor does it follow the reliable paths of satellites. It glows, fades, and then almost teasingly returns at the corner of the sky. A few kids lying on the grass near the town's one diner whisper bets on what it could be. One swears it's a UFO. Another claims it's a government drone. A third, who's just finished binge-watching a superhero cartoon, insists it's the Sky Guardian and dramatically hums theme music until everyone else shushes him. But the oddest part, dogs don't bark. Normally, every mutt in town howls at the hint of thunder or the passing of a late-night truck. Yet tonight their silent ears, perked eyes fixed on the same shimmer their humans are watching. There's an old historical footnote tucked into the memory of Maple Hollow too. Back in 1938, when Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast sent waves of panic across America, the town was one of the places that held a community listening. Families gathered in the school gym to hear the play together. When the panic spread, half the town laughed while the other half locked their doors. The story has lived on as a local joke, but tonight, some of the older residents remember that strange evening. Their chuckles are a little thinner than usual as they glance skyward. Out by the water tower, a teenage girl props up her phone trying to record the flicker. Her video will later capture something strange, not just the shimmer, but a brief pulse of light that doesn't match the stars around it. Scientists are still debating that kind of thing, whether light distortions in digital footage are simple lens flares or evidence of something unexplainable. The night deepens, but the shimmer refuses to fade. And then, at precisely 2:07 a.m., it stretches almost as though an invisible curtain is being tugged from the sky. The motion is slow, delicate, and more than one person later says it reminded them of a theatre play, just before the spotlight reveals the main act. What appears behind that curtain isn't dramatic, at least not in the Hollywood sense. It isn't a saucer with flashing lights or a giant triangle buzzing like a hive. Instead, it's almost modest, a faint oval glow, hovering just above the treetops, its edges blurry like a watercolor still drying. For a moment, the whole town seems to inhale at once. A boy named Alex, who once won the county science fair by accidentally setting off a small vinegar and baking soda geyser, blurts out, "That's not a plane." His mother, trying to hush him, can't take her eyes off the glow either. The strange thing about this oval light is its silence. No hum, no roar, not even the faint buzzing you'd expect from electrical equipment. Just stillness, as if the air itself has agreed to stay quiet. The only sound is the soft rustling of leaves as a breeze unnaturally cool drifts down from where the light hovers. In that moment, one local historian remembers a quirky tidbit from the journals of Christopher Columbus. During his voyage across the Atlantic, some of his crew noted seeing odd lights rising and falling above the horizon lights no one could explain. The entry was brief, nearly lost among tales of storms and strange stars. But tonight, it feels oddly relevant. By now, phones are out, recordings are happening, though no one is quite sure whether to keep watching with their own eyes or through their screens. A few residents mutter that the footage will never survive anyway, that somehow these things have a knack for leaving only blurry, pixelated proof behind. Still, everyone stares. For once, no one makes a joke, no one coughs, no one even shifts their feet. The oval light glows a little brighter, pulses once, then shrinks slowly back into the shimmer in the sky. And then nothing. Just the familiar starry dome, as if the curtain has been drawn again. The dogs finally bark a wild, echoing chorus that seems to release the tension like a pop balloon. People laugh nervously, tug on jackets, and start muttering about early mornings and work shifts. Yet not a single person who stood outside that night goes to bed without feeling a sliver of awe and just a pinch of unease. By dawn, the shimmer is gone, but something remains. Out in a clearing at the edge of Maple Hollow, where the soil is usually so stubborn, even corn refuses to grow. Strange impressions mark the ground. At first glance, they look like footprints, but not the kind left by any creature the locals recognize. Too wide, too deep, too perfectly symmetrical. The impressions form a pattern, a deliberate one curling outward in a spiral, like someone had pressed down a massive cookie cutter from the sky. The farmer who owns the field, a gruff man named Harold Pike, discovers them first. Harold is the sort of fellow who once patched his tractor with duct tape and faith, and who insists the moon landing was real because he watched it live with a ham sandwich in his hand. So when Harold stares at the spiral scratching the grey stubble on his chin, he doesn't shout aliens immediately. He mutters, "Well, that ain't deer." By mid-morning, word spreads faster than gossip at a church picnic. Neighbors wander over leaning on the fence post, trying to guess what could have made the shapes. Some argue heavy machinery. Others point out there are no tire tracks, no sign of entry or exit. One kid suggests giant chickens, which earns him a chorus of chuckles. Still, no one dares step inside the spirals at first. There's something about them clean, sharp-edged, as if they don't belong to the muddy, half-wild earth of Maple Hollow at all. And here's a curious historical fact. Crop circles, those mysterious geometric designs that popped up across England in the 1970s, weren't the first of their kind. Records from the 1600s mention a mowing devil that supposedly carved circles in oat fields. Scientists are still debating that, torn between hoax theories, natural phenomena like whirlwinds, and the possibility of, well, visitors. Back at Harold's field, the debate takes on a similar tone. By lunchtime, the sheriff arrives. Sheriff Darlene Greaves has the kind of face that can silence a room, but even she squints at the spirals, like she's staring at a riddle. Could be pranksters, she says, though her voice isn't all that convincing. Could be some kind of soil shift. Yet when she kneels and touches the ground, she notices something odd. The soil is warm, not sun-warmed, but evenly heated, as if it's been sitting near a hidden stove all night. One boy, fascinated, presses his palm down too and yelps. Feels like when you leave a phone charging under your pillow. His mum quickly swats him away, muttering about unsafe habits. The comparison lingers, though a reminder of how energy leaves traces even after the source disappears. As the day drifts on, brave or foolish souls finally step into the spirals. Their shoes sink slightly deeper than usual, the earth softer, somehow almost pliant. One woman swears she hears a faint buzzing when she stands in the very center, like the static that fills a radio when no station comes through. Skeptics scoff, but the story spreads. Then come the photographers. Maple Hollow doesn't often make the news, but a freelancer from the county paper shows up, camera clicking. He lies on his belly, snapping low-angle shots of the spirals, muttering about shapes you don't see every day. Later, those photos will reveal something unsettling. Faint glowing dust caught by the flash, floating just above the impressions like invisible pollen. It doesn't show up in every frame, only in 3. Enough to unsettle anyone who studies them. By evening, a crowd gathers again. Harold hates the attention, muttering about trampling his land, but even he can't resist watching as the sunset paints the spirals gold. The impressions look deeper now, as though the earth itself is slowly swallowing them back. A girl with a sketchbook, sitting cross-legged at the edge, doodles what she sees. She draws not just the spirals, but also faint outlines around them, shapes like feet, or maybe roots, something pressing down with purpose. One old-timer recalls a fringe tidbit he once read in a dusty almanac. Some Native American tribe spoke of sky beings who left patterns in the earth markers that only returned once in a lifetime. Most historians dismiss these as symbolic stories, not literal events. But sitting on the fence that night, the old man insists the spirals are the same signs. The spiral field becomes a quiet attraction. People whisper around it, joke nervously, and take photos that blur strangely more often than not. No one can agree what caused it. No windstorm has ever done this. No prankster has ever pulled it off so cleanly, and no farmer has seen the earth glow faintly under the moonlight before. And as midnight approaches, the dogs of Maple Hollow fall silent again. Their ears perk, noses twitch, eyes fixed on the sky. The shimmer doesn't return, but the footprints remain waiting. Harold Pike doesn't sleep much the night after the spirals appear. He's up before dawn, coffee steaming in his battered mug, staring out across his field like it might grow fangs and bite. He's not easily rattled. This is the same man who once wrestled a raccoon out of his chicken coop with nothing but a shovel and a bucket, but those spirals gnaw at him. By the time the rooster crows, Harold swears he sees something moving near the crop line. At first, he thinks it's kids again. Mischief makers from town sneaking in to carve more patterns. But when he lifts his binoculars, an old pair he used for bird watching, before his eyes got bad, what he sees makes him freeze. Shapes faintly glowing glide through the rows of wheat. Not walking exactly, but drifting like lanterns bobbing in water. Harold rubs his eyes, mutters about needing stronger coffee, and looks again. The shapes remain tall, thin, and somehow both there and not there. He can't make out faces, can't even tell if they have arms. But he knows one thing. No deer ever glowed like that. By mid-morning, word leaks out. Harold doesn't tell the sheriff, not yet. Instead, he spills to his neighbor Ruth Ann, who is the type to turn secrets into legends before lunch. Soon, half the town is buzzing about Harold's ghost lights. Some laugh it off, but others sneak up to the field at dusk, and more than one pair of eyes sees the same glowing shapes. Now, strange lights on farmland aren't new. Here's a mainstream historical fact. In the 1950s, reports of flying humanoids came out of West Virginia, with witnesses claiming to see glowing figures near wooded hills. Most historians chalk it up to mass hysteria, sparked by Cold War nerves. Still, scientists are still debating whether these sightings belong to folklore psychology or something else entirely. Back in Maple Hollow, the farmer's tale begins taking on its own rhythm. Harold reluctantly gives interviews, short ones mostly muttered between cigarette puffs. He says the figures move carefully, like they're inspecting his crops, almost bending over to touch them. Didn't look like they were stealing nothing, he insists. More like studying. That word studying sets people on edge. Meanwhile, Ruth Ann swears she saw one figure bend so low its face was only inches from a stalk of wheat. She describes it as glowing faintly blue, like moonlight trapped in glass. When asked if she was drinking at the time, she retorts, "Only tea, thank you very much." The sheriff can't ignore it anymore. Darlene Greaves sets up a watch with two deputies. On their second night, they too glimpse the lights. But here's where it gets stranger when Deputy Charles tries to film with his phone. The screen glitches. Not static, not blur, just black. Yet when he looks with his own eyes, the figures are clear. The footage becomes another dead end. Later, a local schoolteacher recalls a quirky tidbit about plants exposed to radiation, sometimes glowing faintly under special lamps. She suggests maybe the figures are projections, reflections of light on chemicals in the soil. But the explanation doesn't stick. When skeptics step into the spirals, they feel warmth, and when they leave, they feel a chill, as though stepping out of a heated room. Children, of course, take it the furthest. A group of them sneaks out one evening, armed with flashlights and comic book courage. They swear wide-eyed the next morning that one of the glowing figures paused, turned, and seemed to notice them. It tilted its head, one boy whispers, like it was curious. He insists it waved, though his friends argue it was more like a flicker. Either way, they bolt screaming, but their laughter mingles with fear. Harold grows more unsettled by the day. He tries staying out in the field himself, shotgun resting on his knees, but whenever the figures appear, he finds himself frozen, unable to lift the weapon. Not out of fear exactly, more out of awe. Didn't seem right to point a gun at them, he admits later. They weren't doing harm, just being. Meanwhile, gossip stretches beyond Maple Hollow. A traveling journalist sniffing for a headline arrives with a camera crew. They set up in the clearing wires and microphones ready. But just before midnight, their equipment fails in unison. Batteries drain, lights flicker out, and one microphone lets out a long, eerie squeal before dying altogether. The journalist leaves the next day grumbling about hoaxes, but his cameraman mutters that he saw something real, something tall, bending among the wheat. And here's where history loves its echoes. Back in 1561, Nuremberg, Germany residents reported seeing glowing objects in the sky spheres, crosses and rods described in a woodcut pamphlet, still preserved today. Scholars argue over whether it was celestial phenomena, mass hysteria, or as some fringe thinkers claim, an extraterrestrial skirmish above the city. That debate remains unsolved, but the parallel glowing figures noticed by many eyes resonates in Harold's tale. By the week's end, the spirals fade, but the stories don't. The glowing visitors are seen less often drifting toward the woods instead of the fields. Still, the impression remains something unearthly touched Maple Hollow. Something that left no theft, no destruction, just curiosity, and the faint sense of being studied in return. For Harold, it's enough to shake him. For the town, it's enough to whisper. For the dogs, though, those ever-watchful animals, it's enough to keep them sitting silently, ears tilted toward the tree line, waiting for another shimmer. The spirals in Harold Pike's field eventually flatten back into ordinary soil, but the talk refuses to die. In Maple Hollow, whispers have a way of growing longer legs than the people who carry them. By the third week, the sheriff's office is tired of writing unexplained disturbance in their nightly logs. That's when a curious librarian named Martha Klein decides to dig where others won't the archives. Martha has always been Maple Hollow's unofficial keeper of secrets. She's the kind of woman who knows exactly where every file, scrapbook, and yellowed newspaper clipping lives, even if she complains about the dust. With her reading glasses perched halfway down her nose, she begins pulling boxes labeled miscellaneous 1950s and county oddities. She doesn't expect much. But one late afternoon, under the library's humming fluorescent lights, she stumbles on something that makes her throat go dry. Inside a battered folder between reports of flood damage and forgotten election flyers, she finds typed pages marked Confidential, Project Orchard. The stamp is faded, the ink nearly vanished, but the words are there. Reports of aerial anomalies spotted above rural farmland. Notes describing luminous beings observed drifting through crops. And most chilling of all, photographs. Black and white, grainy, but unmistakably showing oval glows, hovering just above treetops. Martha adjusts her glasses, muttering, "Well, this isn't in the Dewey Decimal System." Now here's a historical fact that makes her discovery even stranger. During the Cold War, the US government did indeed run projects investigating UFO sightings like Project Blue Book between 1952 and 1969. Thousands of reports were filed, most explained as natural phenomena, but a stubborn handful remained unsolved. Scientists are still debating whether those unsolved cases were withheld evidence or just a matter of incomplete science. But the folder in Martha's hands doesn't bear the label Blue Book. It bears a name no one's ever heard before, Project Orchard. She flips further and finds a quirky tidbit. One report claims that a farmer in 1954 reported glowing visitors in his orchard who left behind spiraled impressions near apple trees. The farmer apparently was dismissed as drunk. Yet here, the report is typed neatly sealed under Confidential. By closing time, Martha has 3 stacks of papers spread out on her desk. Her heart pounds in her chest like a misbehaving drum. She knows this isn't the kind of thing you photocopy for the town newsletter. But she also knows that Harold's story isn't the first of its kind. It's just the first one the townspeople have seen with their own eyes. The next morning, she carefully selects a few of the cleaner documents and shares them with Sheriff Darlene Greaves. Darlene reads in silence, lips pressed thin. When she's done, she mutters, "If this is real, someone higher up is going to be mighty unhappy with you finding it." "Then maybe it was meant to be found," Martha replies. Meanwhile, Ruth Ann, the neighbor who saw the glowing figures, hears about Martha's discovery and insists the town deserves to know. Soon, photocopies of Project Orchard pages circulate like contraband. Teenagers slip them into backpacks, old men fold them into their wallets, and by Sunday, someone even pins one to the bulletin board outside the diner. Reactions split the town. Some call it proof, others mutter about hoaxes. A handful shrug and say it's all recycled nonsense after all. Didn't people once believe crocodile dung worked as sunscreen in ancient Egypt? Yes, they did, and somehow that fact gets trotted out as if it solves everything. Still, the more skeptical voices can't shake the eerie similarities. The spiraled footprints in Harold's field match, nearly word for word, the description of the orchard impressions from 1954. Even the shape of the glowing figures' tall, indistinct bending as if examining crops lines up. A meeting at the town hall turns into a spectacle. Half the community demands more digging, more truth. The other half argues the town is embarrassing itself. At one point, a heated debate breaks out over whether to contact the federal government, until Harold, red-faced and weary, bellows. You think they don't already know that silence is the room. Later that night, a curious event adds fuel to the fire. A black sedan unmarked rolls into Maple Hollow and parks outside the library. Martha swears she sees two men in dark suits walk inside after hours. No one else notices, but the next day, the folder she left on her desk is gone. Every scrap of Project Orchard has vanished, as if it were never there. But Martha, clever as ever, had hidden a single page in her purse the night she first found it. On that page is a single sentence that keeps her awake for nights afterward. Subjects appear non-hostile. Primary intent appears to be observation of local agriculture. It's not dramatic, it's not explosive. But in its simplicity lies the weight of something undeniable. Someone somewhere wrote this down decades ago. Someone admitted the glowing visitors were real enough to warrant study. The whispering grows louder, and as summer settles heavy over Maple Hollow, the townsfolk start glancing upward a little more often, wondering if the sky itself is a library, its pages waiting to be turned one shimmer at a time. The summer air in Maple Hollow turns thick, heavy, with the kind of heat that makes asphalt shimmer, and cicadas sing like overworked violins. The town has mostly adjusted to the idea of Harold's spirals and Martha's vanishing files, though the undercurrent of unease lingers. People are still looking up at night, waiting for a repeat of the oval glow. And soon enough, something comes, but not in the form of glowing figures or spiral prints. This time, the visitors choose the stars themselves as their stage. It begins with late-night stargazers, the kind who lean back in lawn chairs with thermoses of coffee, arguing over which constellation is which. One of them, a retired science teacher named Mr. Eberly, notices something peculiar, a cluster of stars that doesn't blink. He points it out, jabbing his finger toward the sky. See there Orion's belt. Only wait. That one's new. Normally stars twinkle because of Earth's atmosphere, their light bending as it reaches us. But this cluster shines steady, unmoving, and unnervingly deliberate. As if Eberly mutters, somebody hung new porch lights above the town. Teenagers with their phones angled upward try to capture the sight. And this time, the footage is crisp. 5 points of light arranged in a precise pentagon fixed among the shifting constellations. They hold position for hours long after regular stars dip below the horizon. By the next evening, more people notice. The lights return at the exact same spot, refusing to flicker, refusing to fade. Local news outlets send cameras eager for a novelty story. And their footage, too, captures the eerie precision. The anchors smile nervously while reporting it, throwing out theories about satellites, drones, maybe even Elon Musk's latest pet project. But none of those theories explain why the lights move in ways satellites never do, shifting ever so slightly to form new patterns every few nights. Here's a historical fact to chew on. In 1566, residents of Basel, Switzerland reported spheres of red and black moving across the sky, seemingly engaging in aerial maneuvers. The event was illustrated in a broadside in an early newspaper. Historians debate whether it was atmospheric phenomena, mass hallucination, or, as fringe believers suggest, an otherworldly sky performance. Scientists are still debating whether such accounts can be tied to natural events like sundogs or auroras. Yet when Maple Hollow's sky rearranges itself into shapes eerily like arrows and spirals, The old parallels are hard to ignore. Meanwhile, a quirky tidbit emerges. A local photography enthusiast testing a long-exposure camera leaves it aimed at the pentagon of lights overnight. In the morning, when he checks the results, he gasps. Instead of streaking lines like stars usually leave, the lights appear as dots. Dots that vanish, then reappear in perfect rhythm. It's as though they're blinking in a code too steady for human eyes to catch in real time. Morse code binary. The town's amateur sleuths argue endlessly convinced the visitors are sending messages. Of course, skeptics push back. A few insist it's satellites reflecting sunlight at odd angles. But when the lights remain visible even during cloudy nights, that explanation sags. One man notoriously fond of conspiracy talk even suggests it's the government projecting holograms with giant sky projectors. The sheriff, overhearing him at the diner, mutters, "Sure, and I suppose they'll sell tickets next week." But the strangest moment comes on a Tuesday night. Families gather on porches, eyes tilted skyward when the 5 lights begin to move in unison. Slowly, gracefully, they trace a spiral across the sky, eerily similar to the impressions left in Harold's Field. Gasps ripple through the crowd. Even the most hardened skeptics can't dismiss that coincidence. Children cheer as if the sky is putting on a show just for them. Couples hold hands a little tighter. And in the hush that follows, one elderly woman whispers, "They're writing." No one laughs at her. Not this time. Phones across town capture the spiral dance. The videos spread online, drawing attention from far beyond Maple Hollow. Suddenly, journalists aren't just trickling in, they're pouring in. And with them come experts, or at least people claiming to be. Astronomers with fancy telescopes set up near the water tower. Linguists suggest the patterns might be proto-language. Fringe theorists declare it's a countdown to contact. But amid all the speculation, something more intimate happens in Maple Hollow. Families start staying outside together at night wrapped in blankets, watching the sky like it's the town's new drive-in theater. Conversations that once ended at dinner now linger under the stars. People soften. In a strange way, the lights bring them closer, reminding them of how small they are and how vast the universe is. Still, there are murmurs of unease. What if the patterns are warnings, not greetings? What if the spiral is not art but a map? A claim, a marking of territory. Scientists are still debating how to interpret phenomena like this, caught between the thrill of possibility and the dread of meaning. For now, though, the lights remain. Silent, steady, and impossibly patient. Watching, perhaps. Writing, perhaps. Or maybe waiting for Maple Hollow to finally look back and understand. The desert waits with the kind of silence that feels intentional, like the land itself is holding its breath. In the middle of that silence, an old iron box rests in a forgotten research outpost, its hinges stiff with rust. A junior archivist named Jonah is the first to notice the strange symbol etched into its lid, something that looks like a spiral, but with tiny teeth along the edges, as if the pattern itself might spin and bite. He pries it open, expecting moldy documents or some government-issued clipboards, but instead finds a roll of undeveloped film sealed inside a metal canister. There's a note too, brittle paper scrawled in half-faded ink. For when they return, Jonah isn't the kind to believe in UFOs. He likes Sudoku puzzles, microwaved noodles, and insists that his mother's knitting club is more mysterious than anything Roswell ever offered. Still, curiosity wins. He smuggles the canister out and hands it off to a friend who works in a photography lab. When the film is finally developed, a sequence of blurred but undeniable shapes emerges. Not saucers, not balloons, something different. long bodies suspended in the desert air glimmering in the sunlight, like metallic jellyfish. Some frames catch them near the horizon, bending slightly, as if the air itself is struggling to hold their weight. Jonah jokes about bad focus, but the friend swears the negatives are clean. One of the strangest frames shows the figures hovering over a line of jeeps. The vehicles are clearly mid-20th century military issue, dust clouding their wheels. Several soldiers are pictured, their faces frozen in expressions of awe rather than fear. In the background, an officer points at the sky with binoculars, though he appears to be laughing. Scientists are still debating that expression. Was it disbelief, hysteria, or the simple absurdity of witnessing something utterly outside human experience? The discovery echoes another moment in history. Back in the 1940s, coded documents about the Manhattan Project were hidden in similarly mundane outposts, tucked in cigar boxes and coffee tins. Governments love to bury secrets in plain sight, and it seems this film followed the same path. A fringe tidbit emerges from Jonah's research. Some archivists whisper that identical film rolls were spotted in Europe after World War II, carried quietly across borders in diplomatic pouches. Jonah posts a few low-resolution scans online, not expecting much. Within hours, his inbox fills with demands from researchers' cranks and one museum curator who insists the spiral symbol on the canister matches petroglyphs found in caves across New Mexico. The curator points out that some tribes describe star jellyfish long before the invention of cameras, as if they already knew what Jonah's film depicted. That connection unsettles him more than the photographs themselves. Sitting alone in his apartment, Jonah pins the images to his wall. They flutter slightly in the breeze from a rattling fan, and he jokes to himself that if the jellyfish creatures float in, he'll just offer them instant noodles. Yet deep down, he feels a thread tugging. It's as if the box had been waiting not just in the desert, but specifically for him. He wonders whether the note, for when they return, was a prediction or an instruction. The film continues to haunt him. He notices odd things, streetlights flicker when he walks past his phone, glitches with static, and at night he dreams of enormous translucent shapes pressing against the walls of his room. Dreams can be dismissed, but the way his cat arches its back and hisses at the ceiling is harder to laugh off. In one particularly vivid dream, Jonah sees himself standing under a blazing desert sky. The air vibrates heavy, as if the atmosphere is stretched thin. Above him, countless metallic jellyfish drift in slow procession, their tendrils shimmering like glass filaments. Some of them descend, brushing the sand, yet leaving no mark. He wakes up sweating, muttering a joke about needing fewer burritos before bed. But the next morning he finds grains of red desert sand scattered across his floor, even though he hasn't traveled anywhere near a desert in years. Scientists are still debating that too, dreams and reality bleeding together, or perhaps something else. The line feels thinner for Jonah now, like the edges of the developed photographs themselves brittle and threatening to curl. He can't shake the thought that maybe those soldiers in the images weren't just witnesses. Maybe they were chosen like he has somehow been chosen, handed proof in a box that shouldn't have survived 70 years in the desert sun. The story lingers in the shadows of his apartment no matter how much light he turns on. And deep down, Jonah knows he hasn't found the full secret yet. The box was only the beginning, a whisper of something larger waiting just beyond reach, shimmering in the heat haze of history, ready to drift closer. The photographs ripple outward like concentric circles on a pond, catching attention in unexpected places. Among the people who notice them is a retired linguist named Dr. Helena Varga, a woman whose apartment resembles an archaeological dig more than a living space. She spends her days surrounded by ancient tablets, dog-eared books, and a stack of crossword puzzles she never quite finishes. When Helena scrolls through Jonah's grainy uploads late one evening, her teacup clatters against its saucer. The spiral symbol carved onto the canister isn't just decoration. It matches a motif she once catalogued on fragments of pottery unearthed in Mesopotamia pottery, dated at least 5,000 years old. She can't shake the resemblance. Those old shards bore marks that scholars argued over endlessly. Were they celestial charts, crop cycles, or simply some potter's doodle? Scientists are still debating that, though Helena always suspected something deeper. To see the same spiral resurface in connection with a 20th century photograph of floating metallic shapes, it feels like the past is winking at her, saying, "Told you so." She writes to Jonah, half expecting him to ignore her. Instead, he replies almost instantly. He admits he's been losing sleep, though he frames it with a joke about getting loyalty points from his local coffee shop. He tells her about the sand on his floor, the static on his phone, even his cat's weird behavior. Helena reassures him, though privately, she feels the same creeping unease. She pulls out her notebooks, flipping through years of scribbled observations. In one margin, she'd written about the Sumerian word ulu, which some translated as heavenly lights, but others suspected meant beings of brightness. The quirky tidbit here: a Victorian explorer once mistranslated ulu as glittering sheep, leading to decades of scholarly jokes about cosmic livestock. Helena chuckles at that memory, but her hands still tremble as she types. Jonah and Helena strike up a strange partnership, bridging generations through late-night emails and glitchy video calls. She pushes him to look more closely at the photographs, noting patterns in the way the jellyfish forms drift. He notices something she missed in one frame: their tendrils line up with a constellation visible only in summer months. That detail anchors the images in time. If correct, it means the photos were taken in July of 1952, the same month Washington, D.C. experienced a famous wave of UFO sightings. Helena can't ignore the overlap. Their exchanges grow more urgent. Jonah jokes about feeling like Mulder and Scully, though he claims he'd preferred the role of the skeptical one: less pressure, more snacks. Helena snorts, but doesn't disagree. They decide to meet in person. When she finally sees him step off the train, clutching a manila envelope stuffed with prints, she feels a shiver of recognition, as if this is not a chance encounter, but something scripted long ago. They spread the photographs across her dining table, pushing aside teapots and dictionaries. Light from a flickering lamp paints the jellyfish figures in a golden haze. Helena notices that the spiral symbol on the canister seems to echo the arrangement of the creatures in the sky, as though the mark is a map rather than a signature. She presses her fingers over the curling lines and whispers half to herself, "This is older than we think." Outside her apartment, thunder rumbles, though no storm was forecast. Jonah glances at the window uneasily, but Helena waves it off with a dry joke about the weather service having the accuracy of a toddler tossing dice. Still, when the lights flicker, both of them fall silent. Later that night, Helena digs out a clay replica she once bought from a museum gift shop. It bears the same spiral mark. She'd thought it a novelty, but now it feels like a breadcrumb from history pointing her forward. She holds it next to Jonah's canister, marveling at the way ancient and modern align like two halves of a puzzle. Neither of them sleeps well. Helena dreams of clay tablets rearranging themselves into spirals, while Jonah dreams of jellyfish gliding through library stacks, brushing scrolls with their shimmering tendrils. They share these dreams over breakfast, both laughing, but not quite comfortably. The photographs have become more than artifacts, they're invitations. And both Jonah and Helena sense that the deeper they look, the less they'll be able to turn back. The following weeks take on a rhythm, Jonah sending fresh scans, Helena poring over her old notes, both of them slipping further into a labyrinth of connections. Sleep becomes a luxury neither can quite afford. The spiral keeps reappearing not just on pottery fragments or the canister, but in places they hadn't thought to check. Helena unearths an obscure reference from Herodotus, who once described the sky turning in spirals as lights walked across it. Historians have always assumed it was poetic license or mistranslation, but with these photographs lying in front of her, she wonders if maybe he was trying to describe the same jellyfish-like forms. Jonah, for his part, finds himself compulsively zooming in on the soldiers' faces in the photos. He notes their posture, their gaze the way one man grips his rifle, but doesn't raise it, as though unsure whether to salute or surrender. Scientists are still debating that kind of body language in old wartime images, whether it reveals compliance confusion or something stranger. Jonah keeps coming back to the officer laughing with his binoculars. Why laugh unless the sight was so overwhelming it short-circuited fear? Their late-night calls grow more frenetic. Jonah cracks jokes to lighten the weight. If the jellyfish beam me up Helena, I'm demanding at least a decent Wi-Fi connection, he quips, earning a rare snort of laughter from her. She counters with her own dry wit. If they beam me up, I'm asking them to alphabetize my tablet collection. These moments of humor punctuate the tension like tiny lanterns against encroaching dark. But the tension keeps creeping closer. One evening, while Jonah is on a video call, the screen glitches, and for a split second, Helena swears she sees something behind him, a faint shimmer, as though water is moving in midair. She says nothing, blaming her tired eyes. Yet later, when Jonah emails her, he mentions his cat leaping at empty space and knocking over a lamp. Helena dives into more fringe tidbits. She discovers a 16th century diary entry by a Spanish missionary in Peru, describing transparent sails drifting across the Andes sky. Most scholars dismiss it as hallucination from altitude sickness, but she feels a tingle of recognition. It fits too neatly. The spiral pattern, the shimmering beings, the repeated motif of laughter and awe rather than terror. It all threads together like a story stitched across centuries. They decide to consult others discreetly. Jonah sends copies to a physicist friend, who replies cryptically, "These aren't photographic artifacts. The negatives are clean. But whatever they are, the structures imply some kind of resonance with the atmosphere itself. I'd keep quiet if I were you." That phrase, keep quiet, rings louder in Jonah's mind than the validation. Helena, meanwhile, revisits her university archives. She finds references to a lost Mesopotamian tablet, supposedly destroyed during World War II bombings, one that bore the full spiral symbol carved edge to edge. A colleague once described it in a letter, not a map, but a summoning. She tucks that line away, though repeating it aloud makes her feel like the walls of her apartment lean closer. The ordinary world continues around them. Trains arrive on schedule, groceries are bought, bills paid. Yet both feel as though they're standing in the pause before a curtain rises. Jonah remarks that even street sounds seem muted now, as if the city itself is listening. Helena admits she hears faint humming at night, a tone pitched so low it seems to vibrate her bones. Then one night they both receive the same anonymous email. No subject line, just a single attachment, a blurred photograph of the spiral drawn in chalk on a modern sidewalk somewhere neither recognizes. Beneath it, a typed note reads, "They never left." Helena closes her laptop with a snap, heart thudding. Jonah laughs nervously and mutters something about pranksters with too much free time. But both of them know, without saying, that the message feels less like a threat and more like an echo, another ripple expanding outward, urging them deeper. The photographs, the pottery, the diary fragments, the chalk spiral on the sidewalk, everything is converging. And somewhere just beyond sight, those shimmering jellyfish still drift, waiting for the moment when secrecy dissolves into revelation. The photographs, the chalk spiral, the fragments of pottery, these become the compass points of Jonah and Helena's strange journey. Yet neither of them is prepared for the way their private obsession begins to leak into the public. One morning, Jonah wakes to find that the scans he uploaded in obscure forums have gone viral. Meme pages plaster the jellyfish shapes with captions like, "When your Wi-Fi finally connects and me floating through life." He groans, joking to Helena that his brush with alien history has been reduced to social media punchlines. But beneath his sarcasm, unease churns. The viral spread draws unwanted attention. A local reporter knocks at his door, waving a printout of one photo. Jonah feigns ignorance, though his nervous laughter makes it obvious. Helena, more cautious, warns him over the phone. Once the public eye latches on the rest, follows government's academics and all the skeptics who'll happily bury you under ridicule. She knows history well enough. The Roswell incident became infamous not just for the alleged crash, but for how quickly it turned into cultural theatre, a circus that made the truth harder to see. In a quirky tidbit, she shares Helena recalls that in the 1950s, some toy companies sold UFO spotter kits to children complete with binoculars and fake badges. The Cold War paranoia was commodified into playtime. That's how quickly mystery becomes merchandise, she tells Jonah. And once it's a joke, it's harder to take seriously again. But this time feels different. The chalk spiral photograph circulates alongside Jonah's images, and online sleuths begin mapping where similar spirals have appeared. Posts emerge of chalk spirals in London, Berlin, Sao Paulo, each one eerily consistent in proportion. Scientists are still debating whether these are coordinated hoaxes or something stranger. Jonah scrolls through these threads at night, biting his lip, muttering that if it's a hoax, it's global and unsettlingly well organized. Helena becomes the grounding voice, though even she feels the cracks widening. She pores over translations of Akkadian tablets, stumbling across passages that mention shapes without weight that drink from the sky. The words read like poetry, yet the echo of the photographs is impossible to ignore. When she tells Jonah, he jokes weakly, "Great, so we're dealing with sky-drinking jellyfish. Should we offer them Gatorade?" Helena chuckles, grateful for the levity, but both of them hear the undercurrent of fear. They arrange to meet again this time, not in Helena's cozy apartment, but in a quiet library archive, a place where whispers feel natural. Spread across the table are maps, photographs, and translations, a collage of centuries converging. As they lean in, Jonah notices a pattern. The chalk spirals align roughly with the paths of historic solar eclipses. He traces the map with his finger, a chill crawling up his arm. Could the spirals be markers of some cosmic schedule? Helena nods slowly. Ancient civilizations tracked eclipses with staggering accuracy, she murmurs. Stonehenge, the Mayans, the Babylonians. Maybe these beings followed the same patterns, revealing themselves when the skies dimmed. She pauses, then adds, "Scientists are still debating whether ancient eclipse records were purely astronomical or infused with spiritual encounters. Maybe they were both." Their conversation stretches past midnight. Outside the city sleeps, but inside the archive they feel tethered to something vast and watchful. Jonah breaks the tension with another joke. If one of these jellyfish shows up tonight, I'm demanding they explain crop circles. That's been bugging me since childhood. Helena laughs softly, shaking her head, but she doesn't dismiss the possibility outright. When they finally pack up, Jonah slips the canister back into his bag. He feels its weight, or perhaps something more than weight, a humming presence that seems to pulse faintly against his palm. He doesn't tell Helena, but each time he carries it, he swears he hears the faintest whisper, like the sound of paper fluttering in a still room. As they part ways under the flickering street lamps, neither says it aloud, but both know the spirals are no longer relics of history. They're instructions, messages drawn across centuries, waiting for someone stubborn or reckless enough to follow them. Jonah wakes one morning to find the chalk spiral outside his own apartment. It's not spray paint or childish doodles. The lines are deliberate, precise, drawn in thick white chalk that hasn't smudged despite the night's rain. He stands over it in his slippers, clutching his coffee, muttering, "Great, either I've got alien neighbors or some very committed art students." Yet deep down he knows this spiral isn't random. It's an answer. He photographs it and sends the image to Helena. She doesn't laugh. Instead, she studies the proportions and notes something unsettling. It's almost identical to the layout of the star chart. From the photographs, the jellyfish forms aligning in arcs that mimic this very spiral. She whispers into the phone, "Jonah, it's a map. They're marking where to gather." Scientists are still debating whether such patterns are intentional or a case of human projection pareidolia, the tendency to see meaning in randomness. But Helena insists the mathematics are too precise. She overlays the chalk spiral with ancient Mesopotamian carvings, and the fit is uncanny, like one hand drawing across time. Jonah tries to keep it light. "So what do you think the aliens are leaving me a GPS code on my sidewalk? Should I expect Uber jellyfish to arrive for pickup?" Helena doesn't smile. She tells him to pack a bag. The two meet in a rented car and drive into the desert, guided by Helena's cross-referenced maps. Their destination, a stretch of barren land known for abandoned military testing. Rumors swirl that the US Air Force once buried wreckage there, though no one has proven it. A quirky tidbit surfaces back in the 1960s. Some desert towns held UFO barbecues festivals, where people grilled hot dogs while scanning the skies with binoculars. Jonah laughs at the thought, then glances nervously upward. They drive for hours until the GPS loses signal. Following Helena's hand-drawn map, they reach a dry riverbed, its sand pale under the starlight. They're etched into the earth as if seared by light itself. Is another spiral, vast, stretching wider than a football field. The lines glow faintly, though no lanterns or fires are present. Jonah's voice cracks as he mutters, "Please tell me that's just bioluminescent fungus." Helena kneels, running her fingers along the glowing sand. It vibrates faintly like static before a storm. She whispers, "It's not fungus. It's a signal." The night air thickens. A low hum begins, not mechanical, not natural, but resonant, as though the desert itself is singing. Jonah cracks a joke about the world's worst karaoke machine, but his voice shakes. Above them, the stars shimmer strangely, as if rearranging themselves into new constellations. They sit at the edge of the glowing spiral, waiting. Hours slip by. Nothing descends. No metallic jellyfish appear. Just the hum, steady and endless, vibrating into their bones. Exhausted, they doze lightly in the car. By dawn, the spiral has faded, leaving nothing but disturbed sand and the ache of unanswered questions. Driving back, Jonah tries to laugh it off, muttering, "Guess the invitation got lost in the mail." But Helena says nothing. She clutches the canister in her lap, her fingers white against the metal. as if holding it tightly enough will force the truth to stay. Yet both of them know the desert isn't finished with them. The spirals are appearing faster now, closer, weaving them into a story written across the sky, waiting for its final act. The desert spiral haunts them both. Jonah dreams of it glowing beneath his feet, pulsing like the heartbeat of the earth. Helena dreams of clay tablets rearranging themselves into a single curling line, wrapping tighter and tighter until the world spins. They laugh about it over coffee the next day, joking that if dreams are RSVP cards, they've already accepted the invitation. But their laughter doesn't erase the unease. The viral chatter online grows louder. People begin posting photos of spirals carved into fields, burned into patches of grass, even etched in frost on windows. Some call it mass hysteria. Others claim coordinated pranksters. Scientists are still debating whether collective illusions can spread so quickly, or whether something external stirs these patterns into human perception. Helena receives an invitation from a small academic symposium in Arizona. The theme, symbol and sky in ancient civilizations. She decides to attend, dragging Jonah along with the promise of free hotel breakfast. The conference is a mix of serious scholars, wide-eyed enthusiasts, and a man who sells alien-shaped keychains in the lobby. Jonah whispers jokes about buying one for Helena's clay tablet collection, earning her exasperated glare. But during one lecture, a young astrophysicist presents a startling overlay. He's mapped recent spiral sightings against satellite readings of atmospheric anomalies, pockets of ionized air forming in spiral patterns at high altitude. We don't know what causes them, the scientist admits, but they're increasing in frequency. The room buzzes with speculation. Helena scribbles notes furiously. Jonah mutters, "Great sky jellyfish," with Wi-Fi signals. Later, in the quiet of the hotel, Helena confides something she hasn't admitted before. She's been hearing whispers. Not loud, not distinct, but faint murmurings at night, just as she drifts towards sleep. Words she can't translate, though they feel ancient. Jonah listens uneasy, before admitting he's been hearing them too. Only for him, it sounds like laughter, soft and echoing, as if shared between beings who don't quite understand the joke. A quirky tidbit from history floats into Helena's mind. In medieval Europe, people sometimes reported hearing the ringing of invisible bells before comets appeared. Chroniclers debated whether these were heavenly warnings or tricks of the ear. She wonders aloud if their whispers are a modern version of the same phenomenon. The next day, Jonah notices strangers following them. A pair of men in plain suits linger at the back of sessions, then board the same elevator. He cracks a joke about being stalked by men in beige, but his humor doesn't hide the chill down his spine. Helena urges him to stay calm. After all, governments have a long history of shadowing UFO enthusiasts, from Project Blue Book investigators to Cold War intelligence services sniffing out Soviet disinformation. Back home, the spirals follow them. Jonah spots one traced in condensation on his bus window. Helena finds another scratched lightly into the cover of an old notebook. She swears she hadn't touched in years. It feels less like they're chasing the mystery now, and more like the mystery is chasing them. Still, the pull is undeniable. Late one evening, Jonah blurts out, "What if this isn't warning us? What if it's inviting us? Like the spirals aren't messages about them. They're messages to us." Helena doesn't answer at first. Then she sighs and says, "Maybe. But remember, every invitation has a cost." As she speaks, the canister between them hums faintly louder than before, vibrating on the table as if alive. They freeze, eyes locked, waiting for the next move in a game they barely understand. The canister's hum lingers long after it stills, as though silence itself is reluctant to return. Jonah jokes weakly. Guess I should stop storing it next to the microwave, but even he can't mask his unease. Helena sets the canister on a folded towel as if cushioning it might soften whatever energy thrums inside. Neither of them mentions that the hum felt less like a machine and more like a living breath. Over the next few days, the patterns escalate. Spirals show up in everyday places, a child's doodle on a restaurant napkin tire tracks, curling in perfect arcs on a muddy road, even a swirl of milk in Jonah's morning coffee that holds its form too long. Scientists are still debating whether synchronicities are just coincidences stitched together by human brains craving order. But here, the odds feel slim. Jonah mutters that the universe seems to be doodling in his latte art, and Helena doesn't laugh. Their partnership deepens into something almost conspiratorial. They pore over Helena's notebooks late into the night, candles flickering, as though responding to their murmurs. She reads aloud a passage from a Sumerian hymn describing lights that wander with purpose, not bound to stars. The translation has always been contested. Some scholars argue it's just poetic reference to planets. But Helena feels certain the hymn speaks of something else, something like the beings in the photographs. Jonah, restless, digs through modern archives. He discovers declassified CIA documents noting psychological disturbances among soldiers stationed in desert test zones during the 1950s. One line stands out, recurring motif in sketches, spiral forms, significance unknown. He reads it aloud, whistling low. Spirals again. Either aliens love geometry, or we've all been trapped in the world's weirdest art project. To lighten the tension, Jonah buys a spiral notebook, holds it up and quips, "Look, they've infiltrated Office Depot." Helena rolls her eyes, but doesn't deny the truth shimmering beneath the joke. One evening, during a walk through Elena's neighborhood, they stumble across a small crowd gathered around a chalk spiral freshly drawn on the pavement. No one claims to have made it. Children trace it with their shoes, laughing. Adults stand back whispering. When Jonah and Helena step closer, the spiral seems to pulse faintly under the streetlights, as though the chalk is more than chalk. Jonah swears it vibrates beneath his foot. A quirky tidbit emerges in Helena's mind during the Renaissance. Some alchemists believed chalk could store fragments of celestial energy, a lunar residue they used in rituals. She whispers this to Jonah, who mutters nervously. So we're basically standing on an intergalactic Ouija board. That night, Jonah dreams of the jellyfish again. But this time they don't float distant in the sky. They hover inside a room, their translucent tendrils brushing bookshelves, curling around lamps, their light soft but insistent. In the dream, one lowers itself until its glassy surface nearly touches his chest. He wakes with a start and finds a faint red mark spiraling across his skin, as if something pressed into him while he slept. He shows Helena the mark. She doesn't laugh. Instead, she traces it gently with her finger and whispers, "They've chosen you." Jonah tries to joke, "Great. I always wanted to be abductee of the month." But his voice wavers. The canister hums again that night, louder, vibrating against the table until the glass topples. Helena steadies it with trembling hands. She feels the weight of history pressing in ancient hymns, military sketches, spirals on sidewalks, all converging on this moment. The past isn't just echoing anymore. It's knocking at the door. And Jonah, whether he likes it or not, seems to be the one holding the key. The spiral on Jonah's chest fades after a few days, but a strange awareness lingers, like a radio tuned faintly to another frequency. He hears sounds, Others don't subtle tones beneath the hum of the refrigerator, whispers woven into wind against the window panes. Helena insists on documenting everything, sketching his descriptions into her journal. If the pattern continues, she says we may be witnessing direct communication. Jonah shakes his head, or early onset madness. Still, even he can't deny the oddities stacking around him. His watch occasionally stops for precisely 11 seconds before starting again. When he tries to capture the pauses on video, the footage stutters and fills with static. Helena reminds him that in Navajo, mythology spirals often symbolize gateways, a door not always meant to stay open. Jonah groans, "So what now? I'm a walking gateway." But the question lands heavier than he intends. They return to the frozen lake to investigate the glowing objects retrieved by divers weeks earlier. Helena secured permission through a university contact, and Jonah tags along reluctantly, muttering about frostbite. The ice has thinned the season shifting, but faint glimmers still pulse beneath the surface. Standing at the edge, Jonah feels a vibration climb up through his boots, synchronized with his heartbeat. For a moment, he swears the objects below flicker brighter in response to his presence. A quirky but unnerving tidbit arises from Helena's research in the 1960s. Soviet divers reported luminous swimmers beneath Lake Baikal humanoid forms that move faster than any natural creature, vanishing when approached. The reports were buried after several divers allegedly drowned during pursuit. Helena mentions this casually, then quickly adds, "But no pressure." Jonah shudders, mumbling, "Yeah, thanks for the bedtime story." Later in Helena's apartment, they replay audio recordings from the site. Most are ordinary wind across the ice boots crunching, but one section contains a low rhythmic pulse repeating in sets of 3. Jonah jokes great aliens sending Morse code, and I flunked Boy Scouts. Yet the pattern burrows into his thoughts. That night he hums it unconsciously while brushing his teeth. Helena hears and freezes. That's the same sequence from the tape, she whispers. Jonah spits toothpaste into the sink and stares at her wide-eyed. The dreams intensify. Now instead of jellyfish, Jonah sees spiraling tunnels of light, endless and coiling inward. The sensation isn't falling, but being drawn as though gravity itself has chosen a new center. When he wakes, he feels both exhausted and strangely renewed, as though energy seeps into him from somewhere outside. Helena, ever meticulous, begins cross-referencing spiral imagery in world mythologies. She finds echoes everywhere: Maori tattoos, Celtic stone carvings, even labyrinths in ancient Greek temples. The spiral is universal, she explains. It could mean growth, rebirth, or a path between realms. Jonah groans, or it could just mean aliens are obsessed with snail shells. Still, he doesn't walk away. One evening, after hours bent over books and files, Helena's desk lamp flickers, casting shadows that curl like tendrils across the walls. Jonah watches in silence, his chest tightening. Without thinking, he lifts his shirt. The spiral markers return, faint, but glowing this time like embers beneath skin. Helena gasps. He doesn't feel pain, only warmth, like sunlight after a storm. The glow pulses in rhythm with the recording from the lake. 3 beats. Pause 3 beats. Jonah whispers, almost reverent, "They're calling." Helena presses her palm gently over the mark. "Not calling," she says softly. "Inviting." The word hangs heavy in the room, neither of them daring to breathe. Outside, the wind shifts. Somewhere above the city, a light streaks silently across the night sky. Unblinking, purposeful, and very much aware. Word travels fast in small towns, especially when lights appear in the night sky, and people whisper about footprints too large and too precise to belong to deer. On the ridge above Maple Hollow, the weekly town meeting feels more like an impromptu support group than a civic gathering. The mayor sits at the front with her clipboard, but she doesn't talk about potholes or recycling bins. Instead, she clears her throat and says, "We all know why we're here. The lights, the visitors, whatever we call them. It's time to decide what we as a community want to do." Jonah, still trying to hide the faint glow on his chest, slouches in the back row. He expects nervous laughter protests, maybe a demand for more police patrols. Instead, one by one, neighbors begin nodding calmly, as if they've been preparing for this moment their whole lives. A retired teacher raises his hand. "I don't think they're here to hurt us." Last week, my arthritis pain vanished after standing near the ridge lights. That's not malice, it's mercy. Helena scribbles furiously in her notebook, but even she pauses when a local grocer confesses she's been leaving offerings fresh bread jars of honey on the ridge, and each morning the jars return empty but polished clean. A young boy pipes up giggling that he saw shiny shadows wave to him before darting behind the tree line. No one laughs. The mayor simply writes, "Children accepted." The quirky detail that breaks the tension comes from old Mr. Benson, the barber who swears he saw a luminous figure picking dandelions behind his shop. Of all the things to collect, he mutters, "They ignored my hedge clippers, but went for the weeds." The room chuckles softly, relief rippling like a sigh. Still, there are questions, serious ones. Helena mentions scholars are still debating whether collective visions, like the identical dream spreading across continents, come from shared psychology or external influence. Could a whole town be genuinely contacted, or are they drifting into a shared illusion? The mayor shrugs. Either way, it seems kinder than the evening news. By dusk, the townspeople walk together toward the ridge. There's no protest, no fear, only the hush of shoes on gravel and the distant call of crickets. Jonah lingers at the back, muttering, "Great we're starring in the world's weirdest block party." But even he feels something shift as the crowd reaches the summit. The ridge is alive with light. Wisps hover like lanterns drifting low among the pines. They don't blind. They soothe a palette of silvers and soft blues. The entire community stands quietly, breath visible in the cool air as silhouettes step forward. Tall, elongated shapes, their outlines shimmering as though carved from water. They don't speak yet, the sense of greeting is unmistakable. No one runs. The grocer sets down another jar of honey. The teacher simply smiles and presses her palm to her chest. Children tug their parents' sleeves, whispering, "They're here, they're here." Even the skeptical barber mutters, "Guess the dandelions weren't enough." Jonah feels the spiral on his chest grow warm, sinking with the hum in the air. Helena glances at him wide-eyed but steady. "They've been waiting for this," she whispers, "for us to agree." The moment stretches timeless, a fragile thread spun between earth and sky. And just like that, Maple Hollow silently accepts its guess, not with contracts or committees, but with open space honey jars and the quiet courage of simply staying. The museum in Riverton is a quiet, drafty place where schoolchildren usually shuffle through on rainy field trips, staring at dinosaur bones and pioneer quilts. Helena drags Jonah there on a grey afternoon, insisting they need to see something tucked away in the anthropology wing. Jonah, ever the reluctant adventurer, mutters, "If the aliens start charging admission, I'm out." The object sits in a glass case, dusty and almost forgotten. A flat stone tablet covered in etched spirals and geometric shapes excavated decades ago from a cave in the desert. The placard reads blandly, "Unidentified cultural artifact 3rd millennium BCE." what the placard doesn't mention is that the markings resemble the glowing patterns on Jonah's chest. Helena leans close, breath fogging the glass. "It's almost identical," she whispers. Jonah crosses his arms. So what some ancient doodler invented alien fan art? Still he can't look away. As if cued by his sarcasm, the room changes. A low hum vibrates through the case, faint but insistent. Visitors nearby frown, checking their phones for interference. The tablet itself emits a soft shimmer dust particles, lifting like fireflies. Jonah swears he feels the hum in his ribs. "Oh, fantastic," he mutters. "Now rocks are flirting with me." The quirky tidbit. A night guard once claimed this very tablet buzzed when thunderstorms rolled in, though curators dismissed it as imagination. Yet here it is humming on a perfectly clear afternoon. Helena notes the frequency matches the pulses from the frozen lake recordings. 3 beats, pause 3 beats. A historian passing by notices their interest and casually mentions an ongoing debate. Whether such spiral carvings represent astronomical charts, ceremonial art, or something beyond human intention. Scientists are still debating that, he says with a shrug, before wandering off to scold a child for climbing near a fossil. Jonah deadpans, glad the experts are on top of it. But when Helena asks if the tablet has ever been tested with sound, the guard hesitates. Funny you should ask. A grad student once played a flute nearby and the stone. Well, it rattled. Jonah laughs nervously. Great. We've got a space jukebox. Helena persuades the guard to let them stay after closing. In the stillness of the empty museum, Jonah hums the 3-beat rhythm unconsciously. The stone responds with a faint glow, spirals flickering like phosphorescent plankton. Helena gasps, scribbling notes so fast her pencil breaks. Jonah just stares, his chest warming under his shirt. The glow lasts only a moment before fading back to inert stone. The hum dies, leaving silence so thick, Jonah mutters, "Well, that wasn't creepy at all." Yet both know it's a sign. The visitors aren't leaving random traces, they're linking themselves to artifacts older than recorded memory. To stone, to symbols, to anyone carrying the spiral. Jonah rubs his chest and says softly, "Feels like a breadcrumb trail." Helena nods, and we're following it. The ridge has become a gathering place. Not for fear, not for secrecy, but for a strange kind of reverence. Families bring blankets and thermoses of cocoa, teenagers sneak snacks and roll their eyes while still glancing nervously at the sky, and elders sit quietly waiting, as though for an old friend to arrive. On this particular evening, the air is unusually still. The crickets fall silent and the pine branches stop rustling. Then, as twilight deepens into indigo, a glow rises at the horizon. At first, it looks like the shimmer of heat above asphalt, but it thickens, solidifies into towering silhouettes. They are not sharp outlines, more like liquid figures sculpted from starlight. Hundreds of townspeople stand rooted, watching in silence as the shapes advance to the ridge crest. Jonah feels his chest ignite again, the spiral glowing beneath his shirt in perfect rhythm with the figure's approach. He presses a hand to it, grimacing. "I swear I'm going to start charging rent for this," he mutters. Helena smirks, though her eyes are wide with awe. The crowd doesn't scatter. If anything, they lean forward. A retired teacher whispers, "We've been expecting this." The mayor nods, hands folded, as if she's presiding over a church service. A child waves, and astonishingly, one of the luminous forms lifts a long arm in return. The quirky detail that makes everyone blink fireflies rise from the meadow below, but instead of darting randomly, they pulse in organized waves matching the rhythm Jonah has been humming in his sleep. Rows of tiny lights flashing 3 beats, pause 3 beats. Helena whispers, "They're choreographing nature." Jonah replies, "Great. Even the bugs are in on it." A drone operator in the crowd tries to capture the scene. The device launches, buzzes upward, and instantly freezes mid-air. Its lights flicker, then it drifts gently back to the ground, as though guided by unseen hands. The operator gasps. They disabled it, without breaking it. Scientists are still debating whether electromagnetic fields could achieve such precision, but no one here doubts the connection. The beings remain silent, yet communication hums in the marrow of those watching. Some sense comfort, others hear faint melodies. Jonah feels an invitation, a tug forward, as if the spiral on his chest is a key waiting to be turned. He takes a step, but Helena grips his arm. "Not yet," she whispers. Her voice trembles not with fear, but with the awe of someone watching the fabric of reality bend. The mayor addresses the crowd softly. "We asked what to do. Tonight we have our answer. We stay." And so they do. Hundreds of townsfolk shoulder to shoulder standing beneath a velvet sky, where visitors of light watch them with patience older than language. No one screams. No one flees. Instead, a rare silence descends, the kind that feels less like emptiness and more like recognition. Jonah closes his eyes, breath sinking with the pulses around him. "They're not strangers anymore," he murmurs. Helena nods. They never were. The figures on the ridge linger through the night, their outlines faint against the stars, until at last they begin to recede, dissolving like mist into the horizon. The crowd does not chase them, does not plead. They simply stand in quiet witness as the luminous forms fade, leaving only the faint echo of rhythm in the air. Jonah exhales, clutching his chest. The spiral is dimming, not disappearing, but softening into something livable. "Guess I'm not a cosmic disco ball anymore," he mutters. Helena, tired, yet radiant, replies, "No, you're just marked, like the rest of us now." When dawn breaks, the ridge is empty, but not ordinary. The ground where the being stood carries faint impressions, not footprints exactly, but delicate depressions in the grass that glisten with dew. Children run among them, laughing as if playing hopscotch on starlight. A grocer finds her honey jar polished again, but this time it's filled with tiny crystalline fragments that dissolve when touched, leaving only warmth in her palm. The quirky detail that stuns everyone comes from the barber, who swears his tulip patch bloomed overnight even though it's the wrong season. "If they wanted to impress me, they could have fixed my roof," he grumbles. But he waters the flowers anyway. The spiral tablet in Riverton's museum mysteriously stops humming. The curator notes it feels slightly warmer, as though used one final time before being set to rest. Scholars are still debating whether artifacts like these can store energy or memory, but Helena suspects they've simply served their purpose. The trail ends here, she tells Jonah, and perhaps it does. The visitors leave no craft, no wreckage, no proclamation, only a town changed by what it chose to accept. Families now gather at night, not to wait, but to remember. The ridge becomes a kind of open-air chapel where silence itself is sacred. Jonah lies awake one evening listening to the quiet outside. The spiral no longer glows, but sometimes he feels a warmth like someone brushing past in the dark. He doesn't panic. Instead, he smiles faintly and drifts back to sleep. Now, dear listener, as the story falls gently to its close, let the lights on that distant ridge soften in your mind. Imagine them dimming into fireflies, then into nothing more than stars, each one steady, patient, and unhurried. The people of Maple Hollow do not feel abandoned, but accompanied, as though the night itself has been stitched with a deeper kindness. breathe slowly. Feel how the town accepts what cannot be explained, not with proof or certainty, but with the tender choice to live alongside mystery. The grocer still bakes bread, the barber still grumbles, and children still laugh in the meadows. Life continues softened by the brush of something extraordinary. Picture the honey jar glistening with its fleeting crystals, and imagine how easily wonder can dissolve into warmth. Let that warmth sink into your chest, loosening tension, calming your thoughts. Think of the spiral, not as a summons or a burden, but as a gentle reminder that connection flows everywhere between people, between earth and sky, even between your waking and your dreaming self. The debate among scholars may go on forever circling like those endless spirals. But here tonight, you need no answers. Only rest. Let the rhythm of 3 soft beats and a pause become the cadence of your breath, steady and kind, guiding you into deeper stillness. And now, let your body grow heavier, as if lying in the meadow beneath a velvet sky. The ridge is empty, the town asleep, and the lights far above keep their quiet watch. Everything is safe. Everything is calm. As you lie there, your mind grows soft and open, ready to wander until sleep finds you gentle as a hand on your shoulder, sure as the dawn that will rise tomorrow.